Today is October 31st, 2024. Happy Halloween, everyone. And I'm Phil Silberman, owner of the firm and your host. I'm joined by Austin Black, who's my co-host. And we are getting ready to do a show. But before we do, we've got an update. We're talking about Chase suing customers over that viral video scam. Austin, you remember that?
Yeah. The ATM hack, right?
Yes, the life hack to get a bunch.
The life hack
To get a.
Well, I mean, calling it a life hack probably is accurate, right? You do that, it probably will substantially impact your life.
Yes, it's a life hack in the sense you got some money and you're going to go to prison and you're going to get 3 square meals a day.
You're going to hack off some part of your life.
Right. I don't know about prison, but to refresh our listeners here on this, there was some TikTok video out and there was some glitch in Chase's ATM system that allowed Chase customers to go and deposit checks that were basically fraudulent checks, not real checks. And then instead of waiting for the money to clear, the Chase customer was then able to immediately withdraw the money. So people got lots and lots of money illegally through fraudulent means. And we, at the time that story broke, Austin, we said that this obviously is check fraud and it could be criminal, and Chase certainly has the right to sue them in a civil court. And that's exactly what Chase did. They've brought some from civil liability lawsuits against some of these Chase customers. I saw in the Wall Street Journal that some people got as much as $100,000 or something in that neighborhood. I don't know how you get that much money out of an ATM, but
that's impressive. Yeah, I feel like at that point you just let them have it.
Yeah, so Chase wasn't going to roll over on this. They're suing some people. I don't think they could possibly sue everybody. Sounds like more of a precedent thing. Chase wants you to know out there that they're not just going to let people get away with this kind of thing.
Yeah.
All right, what's on our docket today, Mr. Black?
First, we're talking about the Purge, not the movies, but the Supreme Court says that Virginia's voter purge was legal, okay? And we'll explain what we mean by that. They're not killing voters. It has to do with like voter registration. And then we are talking about a Halloween costume that is banned in Alabama but legal in Texas. Then moving on to our legal question section, we are going to be answering how you respond to a lawsuit in Texas. This is really hard, really complicated. I think it'll probably take us the full hour to go over how to respond to a law. No, it really won't. But then we will talk to you about a trust. Some people have a conception that they should put their home in the trust and it will be helpful for them for tax purposes or for end of life planning, things like that. We'll let you know if that's appropriate to your situation. It's probably not. If someone's trying to sell you a trust, they're probably trying to scam you and get a lot more money from you than what you actually need. But then finally, our rant and rave section, we will be talking about disclaimers, warnings, specifically crazy ones and unnecessary ones, like on a shirt where it says "do not iron while wearing," right? That was really helpful for me because I've avoided some third-degree burns that way. Yeah.
All right. Sounds like a good show. Let's go ahead and kick it off with our legal news section. And the first thing we're talking about is this Virginia voter thing, okay? Now, what the state of Virginia did through their governor and their attorney general, their governor is a Republican governor, Glenn Youngkin, and their attorney general, they passed an executive order, signed an executive order, or the governor did that rather. And the executive order said, hey, daily, you need to remove all the ineligible voters from the voter registry for voting for elections and things like that. So that executive order triggered a lawsuit by a coalition of immigrants' rights groups. And they filed a lawsuit accusing that Republican governor of disenfranchising voters. So apparently the state of Virginia wanted to ensure that non-citizens were not able to vote, right? That was the goal. So sounds like a good thing, Austin. You don't want people who are not U.S. citizens to be able to vote, correct?
Agreed.
Good.
Unless they vote for my preferred candidate, then I am okay with it.
Okay, so
But
just bring them all in. But let's start off with this, which you think would be obvious. What are the requirements to be able to vote in the United States? And some of these are really state by state. What's the first one that's applicable, the obvious one, Austin, that's applicable to everybody in the country?
you have to be a citizen?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, that's the one. Yeah, you definitely need to be a United States citizen to vote. We only want citizens to vote. And then, of course, you have to be 18 years old. That's all states. Some of the states will allow you, I think, to register to vote at 17 years old, but let you vote in the primaries as long as the actual election occurs at the time you're 18. Does that make
Oh, that's
sense?
interesting. Yeah, I think that's good. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. You generally cannot be a convicted felon, and this is in Texas. And I did not know this, but if you've completed your sentence and you're not on parole or probation, then you can vote as a convicted felon. Did you know that, Austin? So
I didn't know that. No.
yeah. And then interestingly, in some places, you can vote even from prison in certain states.
Makes sense, right? Like you said, I think it's DC, Maine, Vermont, right? They don't lose their right to vote even if they're incarcerated,
Right.
Which makes sense, right? We wouldn't want one of the presidential candidates to lose his right to vote, right?
That's a good one. That's a good one. All right. I thought you were going to say in the District of Columbia, since everyone's a convicted felon anyway, no one would be able to vote.
Same sort of thing, but yes.
All right, go for it. Maine and Vermont and District of Columbia. You can, if you're a felon there and you really want to vote, or if you're a felon anywhere else, move to those places so you can vote.
Yeah.
All right, and then U.S. citizens in certain U.S. territories. So the whole thing with Puerto Rico and that being a floating island of garbage. Apparently, that doesn't matter. That's not going to have any recourse on the presidential election.
Brief aside on that. Okay, I could not believe when JD Vance was asked about that comment. He said, people need to stop being so offended. Okay, JD Vance, let me just tell you this, okay? If you had a comedian at your rally, and I understand he's a comedian, okay? I'm not glazing over that fact, but if you had a comedian at your rally go up there and refer to Texas as a floating pile of garbage, okay, you might turn Texas blue, all right? That like actually might happen, okay? So I don't think you can go up there and say, oh, people need to stop being so offended. That is absolutely ludicrous. People have every right to be offended. Don't have people at your rallies who are going to say stupid things like that. Sorry, that's my side.
No worries. I'm just trying to get the facts out here. And Puerto Ricans, U.S. citizens living in Puerto Rico, in fact, cannot vote. I've got a friend of mine, I think, who's an avid listener, who's a Puerto Rican guy. And I'll have to ask him if he was offended by that. But if you were living in Puerto Rico, you can't vote. There it is, for better or worse. And finally, this is interesting. You need capacity to vote. And this was brought up by another friend of mine who saw a video of Jimmy Carter voting. And he said, oh, Phil, do you see Jimmy Carter vote? He's 100 years old. He could barely. And I was wondering, does he have capacity? It's probably not anything that's really enforced, but you do need capacity to vote, apparently. So I guess if you've been declared incapacitated by a court, you absolutely cannot vote. So
at the polling place being like, nah, I don't think you have capacity.
It's just like a judgment call. If they look like they're over 80 years old, they're being turned away.
Yeah.
All right. So the plaintiffs in this case, these immigrants' rights groups, they're saying that this executive order by the state of Virginia violates this 90-day quiet period by the federal government. I didn't know there was a federal law. You're not really allowed to mess with the voter registrations for 90 days leading up to an election. That sounds reasonable to me. If you're doing updates daily, then it seems like you're violating that federal law. But I did not read the code. The Virginia governor's defense was it doesn't matter because Virginia is a same-day register state anyway. So even if you got kicked off the rolls, you can always go and re-register. So you're not really disenfranchised.
That's a good argument. Yeah.
Here's my question to you, Austin. Are there really illegal aliens doing that much voting? I guess the Republicans want you to believe that there's a ton of illegals out there voting, right? So
I honestly don't know the answer to that question.
Yeah. I tried to find some evidence of that.
Yeah.
I found this one thing from, I think it's the Brannon Center for Justice, found that out of 23.5 million votes, about only 30, that's 30, were suspected incidents of a non-citizen voting.
So I don't know. I don't know about that. Twitter has told me very different things.
Look, I'm a conservative guy. All right, there's no questions about that. I have a lot of conservative values. I'm coming at this from a common sense approach. I'm also a guy who lives in Houston, where I'm surrounded by illegals all the time. And I'm thinking to myself, okay, if I'm driving up and down Long Point and all these illegals are out there loitering about and they're looking for work or whatever they do on Long Point and places in Southwest Houston, it doesn't seem reasonable to me that they really want to go out and vote. So I'm not sure what motivation an illegal alien would have to vote. You could say that.
Yeah, I don't think they'd want to get anywhere near that because, like, normally, and I don't have much. I haven't had much experience like in that context, but just previously with me being an immigration attorney, like usually people that have any issues whatsoever with their status don't want to get anywhere near like illegal institutions.
Exactly. So from a common sense approach, it doesn't make sense to me. I tried to look up what evidence as well there are for a lot of people say there's a lot of people, dead people voting. Is there a lot of that going on? I couldn't find any evidence of that.
It's Halloween. I say let them.
Let them vote. Let them vote. Look, here's the deal. The conservative U.S. Supreme Court says nothing wrong with that Virginia law at all. More power to the state of Virginia.
What was that split along party lines?
Completely along party lines. I think we've got, 6 conservative justices?
6-3?
Yeah, 6-3. Yeah, 6-3. Absolutely split beyond party lines. But there that is. And that brings us to our next legal news topic, right? So this is not a fluff piece. This is about, the title of this piece is the Halloween costume. A specific Halloween costume is banned in the state of Alabama, but completely legal in Texas. Not a fluff piece. And we're not going to tease this out too much. All right. Austin, what's the costume that's banned there? Do you see that?
It is illegal to dress up as a priest, nun, or any member of the clergy.
Yeah. So what about, can you dress up as Billy Graham?
Apparently Protestants are fine as long as you don't call them a priest.
Well, I don't know about that. First of all, I started off, this is a law. Alabama has a law. It says, okay, you cannot dress up as a priest or nun or member of the clergy. I thought my initial impression of this thing was that, all right, this is going to be all about Christian right and values, and maybe they didn't want the whole movie The Exorcist, right? And maybe they didn't want that kind of demonic thing going on. But that was not what this was about at all. I looked up the dictionary definition of a clergy, and I said, okay, and it's the body of all people ordained for religious duties, especially in the Christian church. That could be an evangelical pastor, right? Mm-hmm. And then I pulled the statute, and it turns out that it's illegal to dress up this is what it says, by garb or outward array, to be a priest, nun, rabbi, or minister of any member of the clergy. If you want to dress up as an imam, that's fair game.
Got it.
Yeah, fair game. So this law has been on the books for 59 years, and it's punishable by a $500 fine or some jail time. But there's much more. This law, by the way, it always comes up around Halloween. People do the ha kind of thing.
I volunteer to dress up as a nun and be the test case in Alabama. Okay, I think this is a ridiculous law, and it should absolutely be. There should absolutely be a lawsuit to overturn this.
If you dressed up as a nun, would that be the same thing as like a drag queen kind of thing? Since you're a man and you're dressing up as a woman, is that technically what's a drag queen?
Well, I don't know. I'd be trying to do it to be even more offensive to the Alabama politicians personally. Yeah. So yeah.
Because there could be another law about drag queens in Alabama. I was just pointing that out.
You may be violating that too. Yeah.
Might be violating 2 laws. Okay, but here's the really interesting stuff about this law. It's not just like a cutesy little law that people talk about at Halloween. This actually came about in Alabama in 1965 and during the heart of the civil rights movement. Okay. And Dr. Martin Luther King, he was promoting the march from Selma, Alabama to Montgomery, Alabama, which I think is about a 50-mile march. Okay. And all of these priests and nuns from all over the country and Canada were coming to Selma, Alabama to support the civil rights movement. Sounds like a very good thing. It turns out that the local Catholic Church, the Alabama Catholic Church, did not like all of these out-of-state priests and nuns coming in and supporting Dr. King in the march. So there was this one archbishop, I think his name is Thomas Tulin, and he was quoted. Can you read that quote from the archbishop? Yeah.
Yeah, he said, quote, "Why do these priests and sisters come from other states and Canada to take part in Canada? I love that. To take part in these demonstrations. Certainly, the sisters are out of place in these demonstrations. Their place is at home doing God's work. I would say the same thing is true of the priests. Then why didn't you just put them both together?" Okay, anyways. Tulin was apparently had some political sway.
Yeah. He didn't like it, and he got this passed. Now, you would think that Tulin was a segregationist, okay? Yeah. Because this is all during the era of George Wallace This was all during that era, but actually, Tulin was not a segregationist. In fact, there's a lot of history where Tulin actually backed ending racial segregation in the Catholic schools in Alabama. And he actually founded, I think, one of the first 3 hospitals that would allow Black doctors to operate. So he was very much anti-segregation.
Now, what was like the timeline on this? Was this before, or was this like just in the midst of his attempting to end segregation?
I think prior to this law, prior to this House bill in Alabama, he was definitely against segregation.
Interesting.
And then he really just believed that all of these out-of-state priests and Canadian and nuns from all over the world, they should be staying at home and serving their local base. That was his belief. So
I guess that's a position.
That's how we got this law. This law was also, it really got overlooked in the state of Alabama as well. At the time it was passed, it was snuck in there. And that's because at the time, everybody was really focused on getting this one law passed that would make greyhound racing legal in the state of Alabama. That's what they were focused on at the time. So this one kind of just snuck in. That sometimes you see some crazy obscure laws sneak in Texas, for example, because everybody's focused on something else way more important, right?
Awesome. That's how our government works.
Yeah, it's an interesting. I do have one sort of thing that's been bothering me about this law. Okay, still in the books. I'm wondering, so is it illegal if you're actually a priest or nun, like in Texas, and you go to Alabama in your nun get up and your priest suit, right? Whatever that's called, right? Because you're not dressing up; you're actually a priest.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that I guess it would just depend upon the definition of dress up, right? If you're using that as like you are attempting to appear as this thing you're not. Yeah. And you're having that as your definition of dress up, I guess that would be the differentiation.
Yeah, I mean, if you go back to the statute, it just says it's illegal to have that outright array. So I don't know. All the priests in the state of Alabama at that time, they had to not look like priests. I don't know. Crazy law. Interesting history. If you're out there trick-or-treating in Alabama tonight and you want to dress up as a priest, don't do it. It's still very much illegal. If you live in our home state of Texas and that's your thing, you want to dress up as a priest or a nun, go for it. Completely okay in the state of Texas.
We'll give it a different message. I will say, please dress up like a priest or a nun or a rabbi in Alabama. Fight the power.
Okay. The public message, fight the power in the spirit of in the civil rights, in the spirit of civil disobedience. All right, let's answer some legal questions. That moves us to our next topic. Let's go ahead and answer some legal questions. Now, the first one we've got is, how do you respond to a lawsuit in Texas? Austin, you said this one was overly too simple for our listeners, but so you go ahead and knock it out.
No, I didn't say it was too simple for our listeners. I just mean that it's pretty easy to get an initial answer in there, right? Because we frequently have people call us who wait until the very last minute to answer their lawsuit. And so you need to answer a lawsuit within a certain amount of time plus the next Monday of when you were served from the suit, right? That's usually the time you have to respond for most district and county courts in Texas. And an answer to a lawsuit generally is a general denial, right? It's stated in Texas Rules of Civil Procedure Rule 90, and you just state that you deny each and every allegation of the plaintiff's original petition, and you demand strict proof thereof as required by the Texas Rules of Civil Procedure.
Yeah, that's the language. So when you're doing your general denial, that's what Austin just read there is what you typically stick in a general denial. So when your pro se prospective client calls you up and says, and this is what they usually do, Austin, they say, hey, I got this lawsuit, and at the time, maybe I could not afford to hire an attorney, or I was under a rush, or I thought I could do it myself. And I just whipped out Microsoft Word, and I put down all the things that are wrong with this lawsuit and why the
it was just a word salad.
And I filed that. How does the court typically perceive that or recognize
the court perceives it as a general denial.
Yeah,
basically.
I think that's right. Yeah, it's better than nothing because at least you avoid a default judgment. It's not a great thing because then you probably have a lot of stuff in there that could be used against you and not super clean. And there's other things you need to do. So when we take those cases over, we will file an amended answer, which completely takes the place of the previously filed answer.
And you can amend an answer up until 2 weeks before trial. So in most cases.
Yeah. So as Austin said, the important thing here is when you get a lawsuit, go ahead and file that general denial. You should really hire an attorney first and let them do it.
You should hire an attorney, but if for some reason you are pro se and you can't get an attorney hired quickly enough, file a general denial or something like that. You could even look up the language of what's supposed to be in a general denial. It's really straightforward.
Now, we do have this other thing called a verified denial. Now, sometimes the plaintiff will plead certain causes of action, and that requires more than just a general denial. You actually have to do this thing called a verified denial, and there you do specifically deny certain things that the plaintiff alleged. And there's sort of a list in Texas, right? And here's a flavor like legal capacity. If you want to deny that, hey, you have an interest in a partnership, if you want to dispute the validity of a signature, if you want to say there was no consideration as part of a contract, suit on a sworn account, which is a special kind of proceeding for collecting money, usury, and more, many other things, all under Texas Rule Civil Procedure 93. And you have to sign those verified denials under oath, hence the term verified. And that's a special process. And that can, if you've messed that up and you're calling our law firm or another attorney later, we can clean that up as well by amending the answer.
Yeah. Now, not if it's 10 years after you did that, though. But yes.
As long as there's still time. There's usually still time. 30,
usually.
Before the trial, 30 days before trial. All right. That brings us to our next legal question. And this one is, should you put your home in a trust? This is one that's super popular question we get. I think we've answered this before. We may be answering it again. Probably not necessary in Texas to put your home in a trust.
I think when we addressed it previously, we were just talking generally about trust and whether you need one or not for a probate process. But more specific, and it probably doesn't need to be that much more specific. Usually the same rules apply to the home, but yeah.
Yeah, in Texas, you really don't need to put it in a trust because you have a couple things. One, we have really strong homestead asset protection. So if you have an asset protection plan in Texas, you can put a bunch of money in your home and that is completely protected, and that no one's really ever going to be able to get to that outside of some very sort of limited circumstances, right?
You're not paying your mortgage.
Right. Yeah. You can be we want people to lend money in Texas, so you can be foreclosed for not paying your mortgage. But Texas has a simple probate process. You'll often hear people say, oh, you got to put your house in a trust because you're going to avoid probate. You don't need to do that. You just do a simple probate. Takes about 30 days. Doesn't cost that much money. You could also use a TOD, a transfer on death deed, or a ladybird deed, or if you were to die without a will or even with a will in some instances, you could do an affidavit of heirship. You should have a will. We recommend that you have a will, but you really
trust us.
Yeah, trust us. You don't need a trust. There is an option that's not. If you're going to do a trust, you should do this revocable living trust. You hear about those all over the place. I don't think you want to do that in Texas, but you could. It's a hassle to do that kind of thing. You've got to deed your home into the trust. There has to be some special language in the trust and the deed, and then you'll likely have to manage the trust for a long time, and you usually forget to put all the assets in the trust, and it ends up being a probate anyway. So doesn't usually make sense to put your home into a trust. There are some rare exceptions. Austin, you may or may not know this. We've had some celebrity clients in the past, and they've wanted their home in a trust for anonymity purposes, and they just did not care about paying more property tax. And we've done it in those situations. And that's a common thing, to put their home in a trust or an LLC for that, but very rare. So people, if you think you need a trust, you probably don't. Call us, ask us why, and we will tell you again. So,
yes. Which, and again, like the reason a lot of attorneys try to market trust to you is because it's more expensive to do so than it is to do wills. And it's definitely predatory. Not all attorneys do this, but a lot do. So.
Yeah, and there's a very important attorney general opinion from years ago that tells people just that there are all these groups out there trying to get you to do a living trust. You really don't need it. They're expensive. All right, that brings us to my favorite section of the show, and that's our rant and rave section. And today we are talking about crazy and unnecessary disclaimers and warnings. This one came to me, Austin. I was working out at my gym, and I saw one of these stupid disclaimers on a piece of gym equipment. And I was like, I'm so tired of reading these. So I put together a list of weird, funny, and really unnecessary disclaimers. I think they'd be unnecessary. Let's go ahead. We're going to take these. You'll do one, and then I'll do one, Austin. So you go ahead and start with the first one.
So I guess this is appropriate for Halloween, but on some Superman and Batman costumes, like the ones you get from Party City or Spirit Halloween, it says, warning, cape will not enable users to fly.
Yeah,
I think that one's really stupid. And the reason I think that one's really stupid is because it includes Superman.
No, Batman. It includes Batman. Superman could fly.
No. I'm actually meant what I said.
Okay.
I think it's stupid because it includes Superman on there.
Okay.
Because Superman, no one who likes Superman thinks Superman's cape makes him fly. Not even like a 3-year-old is that stupid.
I see.
But Batman's cape actually does allow him to glide. So I think it's appropriate to have it on the Batman costume because his cape does work as a gliding mechanic. But Superman, no one thinks his cape makes him glide. So that's just a really dumb disclaimer, but for a different reason than you thought.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. I thought you were going to say Batman was stupid because Batman doesn't have superpowers, and obviously,
so he can't fly, but he does use his cape to glide through the air, right?
Okay, so is that you? I think you've convinced me that's less stupid. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right, next one. A blanket from Taiwan had a disclaimer that said not to be used as protection from a tornado. So,
yeah, that's probably something that you don't, definitely not. Yeah.
That's like the old saying, trying to use an umbrella to protect yourself from a hurricane.
Yeah.
Not a good idea. I don't know why. Do they have a lot of tornadoes in Taiwan? I don't know, but definitely don't want to use a blanket for that. All right, what's the next one, Austin?
See, next one. So on a helmet mounted rearview mirror used by cyclists, it says, remember, objects in the mirror are actually behind you.
Which is funny because it's obvious. You ever see the cyclist, or do you cycle at all or not really?
I ride a bike sometimes, but no, I'm not called a cyclist.
No, you're not. Yeah. You're first of all, you're a cyclist if you have a bike that's like over $1,000 in value.
Okay.
And you wear spandex. Okay.
I do that sometimes.
You might be a cyclist. You might be considered a cyclist. And then do you see the little like mirror that protrudes out? That's what they're talking about. Obviously, those objects are behind you, right? Because you're looking at it. But they needed to put the disclaimer on there. Do you know what?
I mean, I understand. I mean, some cyclists are pretty stupid. But go.
Oh, come on. Beating up all cyclists now.
Oh, I'm sorry. If you are riding in the middle of the road, okay, on a 3-lane highway, I'm sorry. Like, you should not be cycling.
There will be some people listening to this show while they cycle, I can assure you.
I'm sure. I'm happy. I absolutely think people should share the road with cyclists. I don't have problems with people cycling. But again, if you're just riding in the middle of the road for no reason, please stop.
The next one, if you ever on a flight and they still give out peanuts, which I don't even know that they do anymore, but look on the bag of peanuts and see if there's a warning that says this product contains peanuts.
Yeah.
People,
Thank you for that.
So a lot of people are deathly allergic to peanuts. They go into what is it called? Anaphylactic shock.
Yeah.
So if you're eating a bag of peanuts, remember that there may be peanuts in that bag.
That's good to know.
All right, you're up next, Austin.
South Park. On South Park, there's a disclaimer that says all characters and events in this show, even based on real people, are entirely fictional. All celebrity voices are impersonated poorly.
Yeah. Were you a South Park fan or not really?
I'm not a South Park fan a huge amount. I've seen some stuff. I think the thing I most know South Park for is there was and I didn't play this game, but South Park made a video game. I don't know if you know this. And in like it was like a role playing game. And in the character creation, the difficulty slider darkened your skin. It was like this, so as you made it harder, your skin got darker. It was so crazy. And what the character said when you did this, said, this won't affect combat, just every other aspect of your life.
Oh my, you definitely cannot do that today. So many things that you can't do today. All right. I was not a big South Park fan, but
I was not,
disclaimer. Yeah. All right. Pepper spray. On a can of pepper spray, it says may irritate eyes, right? Which is the purpose of pepper spray, right? So
spray says that I'm returning it. I don't want it to maybe irritate eyes.
Right. It needs to. It's like putting something on a Viagra bottle that says may cause an erection. I don't know. Or
warning. Warning, may cause an erection.
Or like if we start on our guns that are manufactured now, we're going to may put a hole in you, right?
Or allergy pills. Warning, may stop allergies. What?
Right. I know. It's just crazy. All right. You got the next. What's the next one?
The next one I did already say earlier, but on an iron. Well, so you say this is on an iron. I've actually seen this on a button-up shirt I had. It said, warning, do not iron while wearing.
Okay. Well, it depends how mad my wife is at me. I can see my wife trying to do some ironing on some of my clothes while I'm wearing them, depending upon.
Okay, but the way that's worded, it's talking to the owner of the shirt. Do not iron while wearing. Just taking an iron and going to ham on yourself. That's not good. Don't do that.
Yeah. Okay. and this is the final one. I've got this one. The sun shields in Texas, very hot place. You put the little sun shield in your windshield so it doesn't ruin your dash and get hot. It says, do not drive with sun shield in place.
Yeah, you messaged me that in our work chat earlier, and I was like, what? Phil does this sometimes when he's working up the outlines for our show, and he's trying to message me that he's ready to shoot. He'll just like accidentally copy and paste something from the show notes and send it to me. And he just messaged me and he said, do not drive with sun shield in place. I was like, okay, thank you.
Completely random. I know, completely random. All right, so here's the question. Those are some of I could have done these all day long, by the way, but here's the question I've got for you and our listeners, Austin. Do these really help companies avoid liability? Are they useful, or what do you think?
I do think that the Batman cape one is useful. I actually could see a little kid getting a Batman costume and thinking, now whether the little kid's going to be the one reading the disclaimer, I don't know about that, but yeah.
Here's my take on it, all right? The non-obvious disclaimers are useful, and they are going to provide some liability and legal protection for companies, okay? So I'll give you an example. Sometimes in our law firm, we do a limited scope representation where someone calls us, they've been sued, and they need to answer a lawsuit maybe, but they don't know that they want to hire us as a lawyer. They want to know the opinions and the merits of the case. And there's some time to answer the lawsuit, or maybe they've received an extension agreement from opposing counsel. We will put a disclaimer as part of our representation agreement that says you have not hired us for the entire representation. We are not answering. You'll need to hire another attorney to answer a lawsuit. We are just providing you an opinion. That is a very important and non-obvious disclaimer, right?
Yeah. We don't even do that very often now.
No, it's not.
The more common one that we do at the moment is for deeds. Yeah. Like when we're just preparing a deed, we have a disclaimer at the bottom saying that it was drafted upon representations of the parties and no independent title search has been performed.
Absolutely. Absolutely. The non-obvious ones are certainly very, very necessary. Obvious disclaimers, in my opinion, just useless and stupid, but they can be funny. So I would say, how do you decide what's obvious and what's not obvious? You put yourself in the mind of a normal juror, okay, a normal person. And you think Austin made fun of the cape thing, but would anyone think that wearing a cape could cause you to fly? Would a reasonable person try to iron clothes while wearing them? And if the answer sounds like that's extremely ridiculous, your disclaimer is probably not having any legal effect or doing anything for you.
Though, I think it probably caused a net positive in the world. You know why?
Why?
Because a lawyer got paid to draft that.
Oh yes, a net positive for us. It's caused a net, as obviously it's caused a negative in the world, just people paying unnecessary legal fees. So,
but net positive to lawyers. So,
yeah. Now there are some borderline ones. So you could say like, when in doubt, disclaim, and it's like our legal disclaimer as part of this show, right? Is someone really going to take what we say if we did not have that legal disclaimer here? Like on our show, is someone really going to take what we're saying as legal advice in a podcast?
Yes.
Yes, Austin. This is a very necessary disclaimer.
No. Specifically, when we're going over our legal question section, I think it's pretty necessary to have that disclaimer.
Yeah. Okay, maybe. Certainly, in my opinion, I don't think anyone is going to listen to a podcast and believe that there's some attorney-client relationship that has been developed by virtue of
I agree with that. I agree with that. Yeah. But.
So on that note, it's time to end our show and read our disclaimer. So there you go. I've been your host, Phil Silberman. Austin Black has been my co-host. Like us, follow us, review us wherever you get your podcasts. Remember, nothing in this show is to be considered legal advice, and this has all been for entertainment purposes only. If you have a legal question, email us at info@silblawfirm.com. That's info@silb, S-I-L-B, lawfirm.com. And say you want it publicly answered in the podcast. And remember, it's time to vote. Go out and vote.
Vote.
Happy Halloween. Have a great end of your week.
Yep. Bye.